So I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions. That's the beauty of putting this together. Just curious, each of you have worked at the earliest of stages in EMEA for US-based companies. And in those early days, you know, Thibaut, you talked about being in that office with just 4 people. Lauren, you would have had a couple of people around you. How do you maintain and communicate back to HQ? Like, what is the cadence of communication? Like, how are you nurturing those relationships? How do you ensure that you're getting the resources that you need? But also, my other question is, if it's not going well, do you look for mentors outside, you know, or are you being open and honest back to HQ? Who's going to pick that up? Thibaut, you're nodding.
Yeah, if you want, yeah, no problem.
Go on then.
Yeah. So it's so when so I'm working. So Snowflake, the headquarter is in San Francisco. So what does it mean? When we started, when they wake up, it was like 4 p.m. for us, or 3 p.m. So I'm not a very so what was Chris was saying at the beginning. I'm quite low maintenance, so I try to take ownership as much as I can. So in terms of cadence. Each time I needed something, and we were small enough, I was calling them, but I try to do a lot of things ourselves. And so you need to be extremely structured on the way you are using execs, for example. So we build up some documents where, when we needed to involve people from the US, clearly stating the goal and objectives and what we expect from them. So everything was quite prepared. It's not easy to work with such a time difference, but if people trust you, it's working quite well. So I honestly, I was quite autonomous at the beginning, and they trust me, but it's not the case all the time. And to your question, when things are difficult, so I never keep myself like shit under the carpet, as we can say. So if I feel there is, you can ask constant feedback. So this is very important, to ask constant feedback from the team, and also from your peers, and also from the management. So this is what I was doing to avoid problems.
Awesome. Anybody? Lauren, have you got something to add?
Sure. I shared some of the similar pains kind of with time zone differences. So I used to call it prime time, where you had like this certain period of time where you could only, have meetings with your US counterparts. But in the early days, I mean, we had a lot of our support teams still out of the US. We even leaned on SDRs who were supporting us out of the US. It wasn't the greatest thing, but it just had how we had to operate in the first year. And so we were, constantly, in communication with those teams and leaders. And, for me, I was on a plane probably once a quarter, if not more than that, going back. And, I think it's important to be visible and also be forthcoming with some of the challenges. One of the things I learned is that I was, in charge of sales, but a lot of things, sort of all roads kind of led to me at some point in time in our early stages, before we had a lot of structure and had built out more infrastructure in Dublin. So we didn't have sales operations. So people were often leaning on me, and I learned over time that I had to sort of ask for help more and be be comfortable with that instead of trying to figure out all the answers myself. And so I had to constantly be asking my counterparts in the US for help.
Awesome.
I'd probably add to that, because you mentioned that, James, on small companies, it doesn't go away in larger companies. It's the same thing, right? So I think I'd echo it. Okay, Oracle was a large company, but it's important that you have the network. So your peers in the US or Latin America or Singapore or whatever, before I would go on a Mark Hurd forecast call or a Charles Phillips forecast call, we'd done prep. We would compare notes with some of the others. And I've got a lot of those relationships to this day. And then development would also, or global marketing, they'd bring you in. As Thibaut said, the voice of EMEA. Yeah, it's important to smile. It's important to teach them what we're from Europe, where all the history comes from. There's different cultures. It's not one country. It is all these different collection. It can sound a bit twee for some of them, but being part of it, following the direction, but also bringing the flavor to it. Having those networks, when things go wrong, people will stand up and help you, because actually, in a good, run company with good mission statements, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. So everybody should be there to support you. The bad ones, you can shaft somebody quickly enough, but you don't survive. So that supportive network, it really makes point. And Thibaut mentioned that point as well. When you're talking about different departments, you don't just live in a sales world. Lauren mentioned their sales ops. Your sales ops roles is changing dramatically. They're not just pulling together some reports. These are business thinking people. You have people to lean on that can give you advice, whether it's your HR business partner or your finance or whatever. That network itself allows you to survive, because you can make mistakes, but people know your heart's in the right place, or you're trying to do it, or you acted on the right input. It doesn't go away in a larger company. That network is important.
Great. Each of you talked about the importance of bringing on board the right people and developing the right culture. Outside of that, there's a couple of questions that have been flying around in terms of the development of those people. So sales methodologies, just from a perspective, is this something that you had to adopt? So Lauren and Thibaut, did you embrace and bring over what was already working, or did you set to a certain methodology? And then is there an expectation that new people into the organization should have experience working within a certain methodology playbook environment, or are you willing to teach and train them? And then what does it take from a training and development perspective to actually continue developing those people?
Lauren, do you want to answer first?
Sure, I'll try to answer this one. So, I mean, one of the things you try to balance is like scaling an organization. So you don't want to reinvent a process that works. However, as Steve mentioned, Europe is different than the States, and there's a long history. And you've got to figure out what works in what market. Do you have a product market fit problem because things just operate, the value is different perhaps, or maybe the product just isn't ready yet. So that might change your sales motion slightly. So you kind of go through this period where you import as much as you can, but then you nuance it and be locally responsive. So that was really important to kind of figure out the strategic side of it, and then enabling your people. We actually brought over sort of a land team when we started. I guess I was the land team initially, and then we brought over a few more people in Dublin, both leaders and individual contributors, to kind of bring the tribal knowledge down and help scale the business. And that was really good to both bring culture, knowledge, and help kind of figure out how to make it work in Europe.
Thibaut?
Yeah. So to add on top, so I'm super focused on sales methodology. So I work for 15 years now with Medic. So as I said, I think I never saw something better than that. Probably there are, but I'm used to that. So the first thing very important is sales methodology work if you live it, embrace it, but not enforce it. So the problem that I saw in many organizations is people who are taking by the books, like the sales methodology, but they never live in real life. What does it mean to do an end-to-end process using the different steps? And if you don't have this experience, so I experienced this myself on many deals, and I was still doing that also after, it's extremely important because you build your credibility. So the team will never follow you if they don't understand that you apply this yourself. So second point, very important, is developing people. So constant development of people. So we did a lot of so Medic, which is the sales methodology, but after that, champion building, how to build champions, who are the sponsors, so the people with power and influence in organizations, how I get access to the economic buyer or get high into accounts, how I pinpoint to find a pain, and how I can make sure also I have like power-based setting. And this is extremely important to keep these consistent development sessions that if you teach only technical skills, this is difficult. Sales skills, whatever the age of or maturity of people, you can still learn. I'm learning a lot, honestly, but you need to keep this learning motion. And something important is to have people coachable to receive that. But sales methodology is you can't deviate from that. As soon as you decide, you need to apply it, and it because it works basically.
What's the approach over at Oracle, Steve? You're on mute.
Well, it's very similar to what the guys just said.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yep. So very similar to what the other guys have said. We had Informentis, which I think the key thing I'd say, when both Lauren and Thibaut also talked about hiring different things. You can hire that big hitter expensive person, but you're also going to bring in some of the less experienced engineering, and you're going to have a nice diversity and balance of the team. That's a change in the experience and tenure. What a methodology gives is a common lexicon, a common language that then people can know where they are in a particular opportunity or particular activities that they're doing. One of the things I focused on the most was probably, the leader has to be the teacher, the supporter, the challenger, leading by example. It's not just some spreadsheet manager in the distance. You have to be, constantly out there and coaching. And I think lesser experienced salespeople would jump in on product. They want to just tell you what their product is and not being curious enough. It's actually about trying to teach them to understand what's in it for the buyer, what's in it for them, and being curious enough to figure out why their lives are going to change and facilitating that journey. And the methodologies, the questioning techniques, the guides that can go around that are all there to support that. I like Informentis, but my three questions, my goal guys from Oracle were, so what, who cares, what's in it for them? 3 questions that you can get very quickly into the heart of an opportunity.
Great. So there's a question here, a good question here from David Cherry about starting from scratch in Europe. Now, obviously, you go and win the opportunity to be the leader. And there's a huge amount of expectation on the revenue contribution. You've done the research, you've worked out the TAM, but there must be gaps in the early days on what you actually can deliver in terms of revenue. So, what do you prioritize in terms of those early stages? So, yes, you've got to hit a revenue objective. But what are those other key objectives? I think the question is around those other milestones that you need to demonstrate you're achieving, to demonstrate, you're building towards those longer term goals. Because can you get the revenue right straight away? Thibaut, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So it's a good remark. So a little bit like what I was saying. So during the start, you don't have to focus on KPI for your team, because it's everything around awareness, and you don't have to focus on revenue first thing. So the initial phase. So also you need to have open discussions with the US and saying, okay, at the beginning I need to build the foundations, and the foundations is not revenue straight, or you will do mistakes. So the foundations are people that are ramp up and they are able to sell the technology and really good on the messaging. And you need to build your ecosystem, so using also with partners. And after that, you need to start doing pipeline generation. So there was no expectations. So what I like also and they were very smart when in Snowflake on this, we didn't have any pressure on revenue at the beginning. What we were saying, it was really like, guys, we need a land and expand strategy. Whatever the size of deals, you need to be there. And we started to do a pipeline generation machine, not thinking about the big deals initially. If you do that, you can fail. And if you look at a lot of companies are going after the big whales, and it's difficult. And this is why on this phase, really focus on pipeline generation and who are the customers that will take the risk to come with you.
Great. Steve, you got something to add?
Similar. I think there was a similar question from Jen Conrad on the text about where do you start. I agree. Big bets, those larger ones, they're important for the health of the business, but they take much longer. Volume has to be a really strong execution engine to make it work. I think the key thing is, where have you had some success, whether it's states coming across, whether it's your first customer, that domino to segment is the key thing, and get some sales under the belt. You've got it, exactly as Thibaut said, the land and expand is key. And you could drown yourself in the intellectual exercise of planning. You've actually just, depending where you are, you've got to get started. I think when I set up the Oracle Digital engine in Oracle, when we started the CRM demand, there's some core people that you know in your network and you bring in. I think you have to start arguably being that first line manager, but you also have a view that you need to replace yourself in that to get yourself going into the future. So an eye on the future, but knowing you have to live in particular shorter term time horizons. And as you as a leader, setting where you want to be in that is important to communicate around with everybody.
Fantastic. Lauren, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I would agree with all of these. And I think the only other thing is just to really identify friction points early on. So where are you getting objections and how can you resolve those objections? So whether it's building a land and expand business because you can't get the big accounts to suddenly buy, the size of deal that your model says your ASP should be. How do you actually get there? And maybe it's by using a proof of concept program or some other challenge that you have. But you have to kind of take a list and make all the friction points and sort of figure out how to solve them, and then also make another list of where are my levers for growth, and how do I get there? Maybe not today, but create a path. So it's really about accelerating revenue versus like hitting the plan.
Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, we're coming up on time for this panel discussion. Thank you very much for contributing today. So there will be recordings available for all the talks. In a moment, there will be an opportunity to speak one-to-one with the speakers in the networking section for the next 15 minutes or so. Look, this has been a unique opportunity to get such a range of experience. I just want to highlight that the final event of the year is on the 18th of November. We're also going to be announcing on the 18th of November the top 50 sales leaders in the UK, where we use various data endpoints, not just from volume of nominations, but also growth data and successes and reference points. So I'm looking forward to wrapping up the year with that event. Thank you again to each of the speakers. Really appreciate you sharing your contributions today. And we're going to wrap up this event now and head to the networking. So guys, this is the goodbye and the thank you for contributing. It's difficult to see all the responses, but if we can get some thank yous in the chats to our speakers and a round of applause, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.